Good morning from Vietnam, Bill. Thanks a lot for spending your evening to join our Inside Sharing show and sharing your stories with our audience. On behalf of the listener of the program, I want to say thank you. We really appreciate that.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Hey, Bill, you've been to Thailand a lot of time for work and you yet go into our country. So the next time, please put it on your list and then we will be so happy to take you around town and show you how beautiful our country is, okay?
I would love to do that. I'll definitely take you up on that offer.
And for the preparation, I want to share with you that in our culture, it's going to be very honor of our audience to have you to have introducing about who you are and the works that you do. Would you please have sharing?
Sure, happy to do that. So let's see, as you mentioned, I am a data visualization practitioner. The title that I usually use for myself is I'm an information designer. So I take information and I design it. I create experiences out of that information. Frequently it's data, sometimes it's other things. And another term that I tend to use is I'm a data communicator, because that's really what I do is I translate information into formats that help it be understood by various audiences. Translator is another word that I use. So long story short, that's been my career for many, many years. My if I go way back, all the way to the very beginning, I studied journalism, and I did journalism for a very short period of time. But then I started doing web design and development, and I happened to have clients who had a lot of data that needed to be part of their websites. And so about 10 years ago, I realized that that was the fun part. It took me a while to figure it out. And so that's why I focused exclusively on data visualization, data storytelling, and all the rest of it. I love what I do. I love communications. I love data, and I love merging the two together to make that's something that some people are intimidated by, data, and make it more accessible and really something people can be excited about.
Mm. Uh, Bill, allow us to travel back in time to dig a little bit deeper because your works over the years have been introduced in less than 2 minutes and it's too quick for us to understand about that. All right, so let's
Yeah.
travel time together. When I was young, I wanted to become an astronaut, so wearing an astronaut suit and jumping in different planets, right? So life
Yeah.
didn't give me any opportunity even close to doing any to close to that. So when you were young, Bill, um, what was your dream about the future, though?
I have to admit, I don't know how common this is. I don't remember having a specific dream when I was young.
Ah,
So I'm sure when I was very little, I wanted to be a policeman, an astronaut, a cowboy, something typical. There was probably at one point in my life I wanted to be an ice hockey player. I grew up playing ice hockey. I still play ice hockey today, but that was never really a possibility. But I don't really remember having a specific dream. And actually, that sort of makes sense because then when I studied in school, I always like to go, as they call it, there's a term in English or a phrase, an idiom. I go a mile wide and an inch deep on things. I don't like being pigeonholed, really focusing and becoming an expert and going super, super deep on anything. I just love knowing a little bit about a lot of things. And
ah.
so journalism, data storytelling, I get to do that. I get to learn a whole bunch of different things and learn a little bit about each, sometimes more than a little bit. But so, yeah, the fact that I didn't have a dream growing up it sort of makes sense because I was always interested in kind of everything.
If that's the case, when you grow up, you can do anything, right? Why did you fall in love with data and make sense of data, though?
Yeah. To be honest, it happened to me.
Ah.
It's not like I chose it. I was doing projects, web design and development projects, and I had clients who had data. So, an example, one of my clients for many, many, many years was a huge international consulting company. And they did like primary research. They would research a business topic, develop some theory about how to make that business issue better, and then they would publish that research. It's called thought leadership. And all of my clients did this type of research. They had data, and they wanted to put it up on their website. So I happened to be the web designer, the web developer, but it was always really complicated, data-driven, interesting stuff. So I really lucked out. I just fell into it. I had a knack for it. I was good at understanding the data and translating it, like I said before, in a way that it would be accessible for audiences. So yeah, I can't say that I strategically decided to do what I do. It's more like I fell into it, to be honest.
So you fell into it. Now you've been, not only providing, provide the service to your client, but you also, provide learning courses for millions of users around the world to learn about. Now you teach at university for that. So how did you build from, the experience, fall into the love of doing that, and accumulate the experience, then transcend it into teaching people? Teach us that skill.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very different skill. I was actually approached by, they used to be called lynda.com, and then LinkedIn bought lynda.com. And so they approached me to do the first course that I developed for them. So I developed an online course for them. And at the same time, I had started teaching some workshops. So a company, in addition to maybe sometimes hiring me to do the work, they would ask me to come in and teach their people how to do data storytelling and data visualization. And so I was doing the online courses, I was doing the workshops, and then yes, I also teach a class at a university here in the United States called Data Visualization and Communication. And so, I think how it happened, in addition to just being approached by lynda.com, is that because my whole life has been about translation, like I keep saying, and when someone has data and they need to put it on their website, I'm essentially teaching the audience on the web about that data. So that's an educational process in a strange way. As a journalist, same thing. A journalist has to go in and understand a topic, translate it, and make it understandable to an audience, which is similar to teaching. And so, again, it sort of happened to me. I lucked into it. But now that's actually 80 to 90% of what I do is the teaching more than the actual project work. And I love it. I love talking to people like you. I love sharing what I've learned over the years with audiences. And my approach to teaching, because I'm a generalist, because I do like to learn so many things, and I never really became an expert in any one thing, I really have a very good understanding of what it's like to be a beginner, to have sort of a blank slate, not a ton of understanding about a topic, which makes me a good teacher because I'm really good at sort of simplifying and really teaching a logical progression of ideas to help people understand even a very complex topic.
Wow. Hey, Bill, help us to understand because when you have we have a lot of data, right? It's really hard for us to pick up which data is important, or and not even talk about presenting that, but picking up the clue within the whole master list of data and pull things out to present is something already hard. So over the years of working in this field, can you teach us how should we navigate onto that, like numbers and informations and pull out the things that matters?
Yeah, so data analytics, which is what that's about, is that the phrase that I usually use is that the most important thing to do to analyze data effectively is to have a curious mindset. Because data analytics is really about asking questions of your data. So you have a giant pile of data, it's just a bunch of numbers, that's a little bit intimidating. How am I going to figure out what's going on in this pile of numbers? One of the things I say is step back. Step back from the data and just think like a normal human and ask yourself, what does this data have for you? What questions can you ask of this data? So let's say I had a data set about the tourism industry in Vietnam. Okay. What questions would I ask about that data? And it's a huge data set. I have everyone who's ever visited in Vietnam in the last 10 years, how much money they spent, where they went, gender, other demographic information, et cetera, et cetera. What questions might I ask of that data? Well, if I was the Minister of Tourism in Vietnam, I'd be asking questions like, Where do people who visit Vietnam come from? What type of people visit here? Do a certain type of people visit here more often or less often? Do they come in the hot season or in the wet season, or so there are all kinds of questions you can ask. And if you really hone in on very specific questions, you might start out very broad. What kind of people come to Vietnam? And then you hone in and get narrower and narrower and more specific. Eventually get to very tight, narrow little questions, which you can then test as hypotheses. And then the insights can bubble up almost on their own out of the data. But it's about having good questions. That's really what it's about. It's not about randomly throwing formulas in Excel at a data set or algorithms like data scientists do. For most of us, it's really about asking good questions and being creative and trying to find answers to those questions.
So be curious.
Does that help?
Yeah. I understand. So be curious and ask questions, and from there you start to pull the information, the information out of the data, right? Until you get the data that stand out, and you want to present it. So that leads to the next question: is from the analysis that you got the questions, and then from that one, you are the information designer, right? The designer part is the part that appealing to the pupil. Otherwise, you keep presenting so many things on the slide, nobody gonna look at it. So teach us, how can we hone the skill to design and the information in the way that appealing to people.
Yeah. So I'll share a few key ideas.
Yeah.
Number one, in order to communicate anything to anybody, you have to focus on three things. And these three things are all equally important. None of them is more important than the other. And they all have to be perfectly aligned with each other. Number one, you have to understand your content, whether it's data or something else. If you're going to communicate about the data, you better understand the data. So you have to have data literacy, essentially. Number two, you have to have a very clear understanding also of your audience, right? Who are they? What are they looking for? What's important to them? What do they really need out of this data to help them make a good decision or whatever it is they're supposed to do with that data? So the example I was just talking about, the Minister of Tourism in Vietnam has a very different need to understand from the same data set as compared to the Minister of Tourism from Cambodia, or the head of the largest hotel group in Vietnam, or et cetera, et cetera. They have different needs. Sometimes they overlap, but not always. So you got to understand your data, you got to understand your audience. And then the third thing you really have to have a clear understanding of is what you really want to say. So I know my audience needs to know about what type of people come to Vietnam, and so I can do a good job marketing to them. Okay. So I understand the data, the insights that have come out of that. That's the audience need, and that's my data. What do I want to say about it? Well, maybe I found some really interesting little insight in the data. So I'm going to say what the audience needs. I'm going to say what the data is actually saying, because I'm a truth teller. But I have a particular thing I want to focus in on. Maybe I discovered that there's a gap in travel during April, because that's the hottest time of the year, right? And so in April, we noticed that travel drops by 27%, except people from this one country like to come here more during April. So maybe we should be marketing to them more at that time of year. So understand the audience, understand your data, and understand your point of view, what you really need to say about the data. If you nail those three things, literally every decision you make in that communications flows from there. It's going to help you decide what the story is about from a big picture standpoint. It's going to help you decide slide by slide by slide if it's a presentation, or moment by moment in a video, or whatever it is you're creating. What should I say now? What should I say now? What should I say now? Those three things at a micro scale are going to help you make those decisions. And again, if you nail those three things and you really think through that narrative flow of what am I going to say first and second and third and fourth and fifth, then the last step is to visualize it, right? Create that experience. And so it's about visualization for sure, because visuals are more impactful for humans than text. And it's also about other things we learned from human psychology, like one of which is this point or a topic called chunking. Chunking is the idea of communicating one idea at a time. So to your point, if you have a slide with a million things on it, no one wants to look at it. We want to look away. But if you say one thing on that slide, people are much more likely to pay attention and to actually listen to you. So sometimes you can't say just one thing. Maybe you have to say two or three, but the less you can do it at each individual moment, generally speaking, the more impactful it's going to be. And of course, there are a lot of exceptions and caveats to that, but that's a good sort of rule to follow. So understand the stuff, come up with a narrative flow, and then visualize it and simplify as much as you possibly can to really break through the clutter for an audience.
Bill, so your works involve a lot more complex than just visualizing the data or designing the data, but also understand the human behavior and the psychology of human also. So how do you keep up with the change in that space to make sure that your works are relevant though?
Yeah, so luckily there is a lot of research that is done by academics in the field of data visualization, and it's interesting because to your point, it crosses a whole bunch of different domains. So people who research data visualization and what works and what doesn't work, they come from the field of psychology, human-computer interaction, vision science, understanding how human beings see things and react to visual experiences. It crosses a lot of domains because, yeah, it does. I mean, it covers different topics. Because of my background in journalism, because of my experience doing web design and development, so I have a lot of experience from user experience design, it comes naturally to me to think bigger picture. I have an audience and they need to learn something or understand something or make a decision. That's what it's all about. The data is it's an ingredient. It's just a thing that I use to help my audience make decisions or understand things. So that's one of the most important lessons that I teach people is when you're communicating with data, one of the most important things you can do is to take a step back from the data. Forget about the data for a moment. It's critically important. It's the key ingredient. But people who struggle communicating with data oftentimes struggle with it because they're so obsessed with the numbers. They're so focused on the actual numbers themselves that they forget to just speak to their audience. We're human beings. We know how to communicate. Don't get so hung up on the details. If you remember to step back and do the things that I talked about a moment ago, then you're going to be more effective. And research shows us that across all those domains: psychology, user experience design, and all the rest of it. So, I have 30 years of experience doing this, which helps me, but I also definitely lean on research to be sure that what I'm teaching and doing is as effective as possible.
Bill, thanks for sharing that. If you say that it comes through very naturally because you have it inside of you, and then eventually you'll be able to see the bigger picture. For somebody like a starter, like me, or somebody want to get into the space of information design and and information, the visualization. What skill do they need to acquire now so they be able to build it up over the years and have the ability to see a bigger picture like you are?
Yeah. So, I consider this profession as being made up of 4 key skills. And which one you pick up in which order depends on a lot of things. It depends on what you're most comfortable doing. It depends on where you need the most help, or maybe the one you're closest to already, having. But the 4 skills are, number one, and these are not in order, but I'm just saying number one because I'm going to say it first. Communications. Yes, you have to be a communicator, and so you have to know how to write and to speak compellingly and to just make a good argument. Most of us learn that in university, but not everybody, and that's a skill you need to work on. Number 2 is data. Like I said before, you need to understand your data to communicate data. And that doesn't mean you need to be a data scientist. Essentially data understanding is on a huge spectrum. From here, at this end is data scientists, and at this end is a first grader who can add 1 + 1 = 2, right? So that's data. There are different levels of data literacy. A data visualization person, an information designer, has to be somewhere in here, right? They
Ah.
don't have to be all the way over here, an expert in data and analytics, but some understanding of data. So communications and data skills to whatever degree you can develop those. The third part is design. You know, in order to create visualizations, you do need to understand how human beings perceive visual information, good best practices in selecting things like colors and contrast and balancing things in a visual sphere. You also need to know specific data visualization skills like which chart to use with different types of data and different types of tasks you want your audience to do, et cetera, et cetera. So communications, data literacy, and design. And then the fourth one is there are technical skills you need, right? In order to do data visualization, you need to need to be able to use the software that you use to create data visualizations, and whether that's software like Tableau or Power BI, or it's tools like SPSS or R or Python or D3 or et cetera, et cetera. And you don't have to know all of them, but you're probably gonna have to know some software, some technical skills, whether it's programming or how to use a desktop package like Tableau. You're gonna have to learn that stuff. And again, to varying degrees. Like I can do a little bit of stuff in Power BI, but I'm not an expert in Power BI. I can do a little bit of data analysis, but I'm not an expert in data analysis. But I'm really good at communications and design. And so, you know, varying degrees of skills depending on how you look at it.
Wow. So communication, data skill, design, and the technical skill like using software so that you can you can create data, right? So
Yeah.
and
And you know, if someone was like a graphic designer who wanted to get into this work, I would say you're probably good on the design front, focus more on the data literacy or the communications, right? So the thing you do next is going to depend on where you're coming from and where you already have a skill set.
got it. One thing that you were saying earlier is being curious. All right. And how was you able to keep your curiosity, that strong for, for those many years in this space, Bill?
I think it's because I get to work on different topics every time I work on something. You know, I've
Mm.
done projects for government agencies. I've done projects for, you know, big consulting firms, like I mentioned. I've done projects for school districts. I've done projects for nonprofits. I've done projects, you know, it's every time I do a project, almost, it's about a new topic that I don't know. So I'm always learning something new, and I'm always pushing my own skill set. So for instance, I'm a programmer. I learned how to do interactive things doing the web development many years ago. But web development has changed a lot over the years. And recently, just in the past 3 months, I learned a brand new web development front end framework, which is really good for doing data visualization. It's called Svelte, Svelte. And so I picked up a new technology and learned it and paired it with another technology, D3, that I use all the time. And so that's keeping me from being bored. Trust me, because I have a really focus to learn this new thing. So new technologies, new topics, I'll never get bored.
And then you also saying about questioning, right? Because you ask a lot. We step back from the data and then give ourselves the space so that we can start asking questions about that and make sense about the data. And a lot of people are not good at the skill of asking questions. So
Yeah.
for so many years working with the raw data like that, and data set like that, and being able to ask questions and pull out the right information so that you can present and to the audience, right? How have you been growing that ability to ask questions? In what ways can you share with us?
That's a tough question.
Sorry.
I mean, yeah, no, part of it is similar to how to get the insights out of the data. As I phrased it earlier, it's sort of similar idea that I mentioned before, that you have to step back from the data. So if I'm really focused on the data set in front of me, or what are the column headers? What are the fields, and how many rows do I have, and where did this data come from? The specifics of the data set. It can be hard to ask questions because you're focused on this pile of information in front of you.
Mm.
But if you step back from that and think more about the problems that the data is there to solve, the questions get a lot easier. So again, I'll use the same example. I have a data set about, tourism in Vietnam. And I know that my audience, the person who cares about this data and wants to learn things from it, is the tourism minister for Vietnam.
Mm.
Okay, what questions does that person care about? I mean, that's easy, right? That person wants to know, how can we get more people to come to Vietnam? How can we get them to spend more money while they're here? How can we get them to come during the slower season and balance out some of the craziness of the busier season? Like, there are obvious questions that can be asked. And sometimes they're broad categories of questions. But when you come up with the categories, then you can say, okay, let me get more specific on that category. How can we get more people to come to Vietnam? Well, we can advertise to more people. Well, who should we advertise to? That's a good question. Let's look at the data to figure out who's coming now and who's not coming. And do they come at different times of the year? The other stuff that I mentioned earlier. Because now I can look at the data set, okay, does this data have information about the types of people and where they're from and when they come here? Yes, I have when they came, I have what country they're from, and I have how much money they spent. I have those 3 columns. Aha! I can answer that question that I thought of that had nothing to do with the data in front of me in a heartbeat now. If I'm missing one of those columns, now I can say, okay, I can't answer that question, but are there other questions I can ask based on those 2 fields in front of me? Maybe. So it's a muscle. And so, if you're not good at thinking of how to ask questions, I'm not even sure that's true. I think everybody can do this, honestly. But if you don't think it, it's probably because you're not confident about it, which means you should just practice it. That's really, I think this is a sort of innate skill in humans to have curiosity and want to ask questions about things. And the key is to not get intimidated by or overwhelmed by the data. Step back, think about your audience, and think about the questions that they would be asking.
Bill, you mentioned one word is very important, the word thinking. So that leads to my 2 last questions, okay? My last question for the conversation today. My wife and I have on the quest to help people to improve their ability to think, because we believe that our ability to think these days is diminishing, not increasing at all. So every chance that we talk to experts and, they talk to you, because your works involve a lot of thinking, we would ask this question: how have you been helping yourself to expand your ability to think?
Oh, that's a good question. That's really interesting. I have to start by saying I could not agree more. The most important thing, in fact, I have a slide that I show in most of my workshops that says the most important thing for all of this work is critical thinking. It is the ability to step back and just think. And so how have I developed that? I don't know. I think I was lucky to have grown up in a society and in a family where critical thinking and education and not being focused on achievement in school for achievement's sake and rote learning, none of that was emphasized in the world that I grew up in. Thinking was always emphasized. So I think it always came naturally to me because of that environment that I was lucky enough to grow up in. But it's not natural for all people, for sure, because they weren't exposed to it. So I can't answer how I developed it, except what I probably can say is that I think everybody can develop it. And I would probably guess that the way to work on that is to shut off all of your devices, force yourself to sit in quiet and to allow thoughts to occur. And this is almost like Zen, like I'm trying to teach people how to meditate, right? It's very similar. Most people don't disconnect at all. And so they never give themselves an opportunity to think today. And if you simply step back, sit in the quiet, and allow your brain to do what it's going to do, some of it will be full of worry, thoughts about nonsense things. Some of it you'll be thinking about what you should be having for lunch and how your toe hurts. But then an insight, a true critical thought about work or philosophy or something will pop in there, and allow yourself to run with it. Speaking of running, I run. And as a runner, I don't listen to music or anything while I'm running. It's purely what's going on in my head. And that's a very meditative experience, and I have some of my best thinking when I'm on a run. So doing something physical and
Mm.
allowing your brain the space to actually have thoughts
Mm.
is probably the best thing you can do.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. All right, so exercise, running, and then the thing is, the second is give yourself the quiet space for so your brain to work on the topic of thinking, and information will flow from there. Right? Thanks a lot for sharing that,
Yeah,
Bill. And
sure.
my last question is about the future. All right. So we've been traveling back to your time. Understand that when you were young, you wanna, be doing so many things, and actually that's added up to, beautifully to what you are doing today. And and in the future, is there anything exciting you is working on, and you want to share with us so that we can celebrate with you in advance?
um, so I'm actually developing a new talk right now. I have two things that I'm working on.
Mm.
The new talk is titled Data Driven Decision Making is Bull, meaning it really isn't real,
Ah.
and what to do about it. And I'm delivering that talk for the first time in 2 weeks at Columbia University here in the United States. And I'm excited about that talk because it's about the idea that I'm in a world of data. I make my living teaching people how to communicate data so people can make smart decisions based on data. But we know humans actually don't make decisions based on data almost at all. We're very bad at it. We actually make decisions based on all kinds of other things like emotion and all kinds of ancillary things that have nothing to do with the data. So, but there are strategies that we can learn from persuasion science
Mm.
that can help us help people make decisions based on the data, sure, but also based on all those other things. So we can communicate data effectively, be honest with our data, and also help make sure people understand what they should be doing using other techniques. That's one talk that I'm working on, which is pretty fun. The other thing that I'm working on is I'm considering writing a book, which I think actually your audience would really like, because it's about a lot of the stuff that we talked about today, although a little bit broader, because today we talked mostly about the data visualization. This book, if I write it, is really more about how normal people who are not trained in design,
Mm.
can make everything they create better. So everybody creates PowerPoint slides, right? Everybody creates content of some kind. And most of the time, they make tiny little mistakes, tiny little things, so that the design just doesn't quite connect. It's disorienting. It's even subconsciously makes it harder to consume the content. So I want to create a book to help normal people create better visual experiences because I think it can be revolutionizing, in terms of how organizations around the world create content and have their content consumed by people.
Yeah, Bill, don't wait on that one. Please write that book because like your legacy left, is through the helping the people to do, to learn about the works that you do and translate into the context that they can, learn and apply every day. So please write that book and encourage you to
Yeah.
do so. And I also excited for you for the new talks that you're gonna do in 2 weeks time at Columbia University. Let us know about how it runs, and I'm sure that's going to be a huge, a very good one. So I would connect back to you by the second week of November, and I'll ask you for that experience. Okay?
All right, that sounds good.
Alrighty, alrighty. Javier, thanks a lot for spending your evening joining our show. I know it's very late in your area already. It's so kind of you, so generous of you to spending your time and sharing your stories, sharing your thought, your insights with our audience. There's a lot of things that we are able to pick up today and sharing with the, and to reflect, to think, and to learn, So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for having me. It was my pleasure. I always enjoy talking about this stuff, and you asked some intriguing questions that I know are going to keep me thinking beyond this evening. So thanks for having me. Good talking to you.
Thanks a lot, Bill. Let us know when you travel to this country. Remember, so you have a new friend, new family here waiting, and we will take you around town.
All right, thank you very much. I look forward to it.
Okay, have a wonderful evening. All right.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You have a wonderful evening. Bye bye for now.
Bye bye.
Bye.